The invitation arrived in a cream envelope with gold embossing inside. It described a venue where chandeliers cost more than my house, and the air smelled like old money. An exclusion tucked behind the formal card was a handwritten note on my mother Susan's monogrammed stationery. It read, "Evelyn, please dress appropriately. This is an important evening for Gary. Black tie means black tie, not the drab business casual you usually wear. If you cannot manage proper attire, it might be better to skip it. He will understand." I stared at the note for a long time. The weight of the cardstock felt like a lead weight in my hand. I didn't cry, I didn't ask why, I just looked at my 5-year-old daughter Chloe, who was coloring at the kitchen table, her dark curls falling over her face as she meticulously picked a purple crayon. Emotion is just bad data in an audit. And right now my life was under review. I took a deep breath, summoned a cold clarity, and reached for my phone. My mother's voice was bright when she answered, that artificially sweetened tone she used when she was about to do something cruel. "Evelyn, honey, did you get the invitation?" "I did," I said, keeping my voice neutral. "Good. So you saw the note about the dress code?" Susan paused, and I could almost hear her rehearsing the next part. "The thing is, your sister Tiffany is bringing her new boyfriend. He is the son of a major tech billionaire, very prominent family, very traditional, and we just think it might be easier for everyone if you sat this one out. You're uninviting me for my own father's birthday." I asked. "Not uninviting, dear, just suggesting you're a single mother. You work so hard at that little agency. You probably don't have time to find proper attire. We just don't want you to feel uncomfortable or out of place." She meant she didn't want me to embarrass them. She didn't want the disappointing daughter ruining Tiffany's big play for a billionaire's inheritance. "I understand perfectly," I said quietly, and hung up. I didn't waste a second on anger. Anger wasn't productive. Instead, I opened my laptop. My screen glowed with a different kind of power. The kind made of encrypted files, security clearances, and billion-dollar government contracts. I was not a clerk at a little agency. I was the chief strategic officer for a defense contractor managing 12BILLIONINCLASSIFIEDSTATEPROJECTSIHADSE. CURITYCLEARANCELESMYFAMILYDIDNTEVENKNOWEXISTED. IMADE1. 2 billion in classified state projects. Hot security clearance level smfam lidded and tevenoexisted. It made 750,000 a year. And that was before stock options to Gary and Susan. I was a failure because I got pregnant at 22 and chose my daughter over a traditional law degree to the governor of the state. I was the woman who saved his administration from a massive international legal scandal. 3 years ago I found the contact for Governor Marcus Sterling and hit dial. "Marcus," I said when he picked up on the second ring, regarding our dinner meeting next Saturday to finalize the defense procurement budget. "I have a change of venue." Marcus sounded intrigued. "Where were you thinking?" "The Grand Crystal Ballroom," I replied. "At 7 p.m. It is my father's birthday, and I think it's time I stop hiding in the shadows." There was a pause on the other end, then a chuckle. "Consider it done. Evelyn'll bring my wife, and Lily would love to see Chloe. Well, take the center table." I closed my laptop with a soft click. This was not a breakdown, it was a balance sheet, and my family's account was officially overdrawn. I had spent years being the silent investor in their version of family, footing the bill for their pride, while they treated me like a spare part that ended tonight. I looked at Chloe and smiled. "Pack your bags, sweetie, we're going to a party." The backstory: I spent the next few days in a state of clinical focus. To my family, I was the disappointing daughter, the one who had thrown away her potential. My sister Tiffany was everything Gary and Susan had ever dreamed of. Beautiful, charming, and now dating a man with 3 Roman numerals in his name. She lived for Instagram photos of her perfect life, while I was the other one, the one who got pregnant during her first year of law school, the one who dropped out to raise Chloe alone after her father decided fatherhood wasn't in his 5-year plan. "This is a setback," Gary had said 7 years ago, staring at me like I was a broken piece of machinery. "But it doesn't have to ruin your life. There are options." I told him. I was keeping her. Gary's face hardened. "Olivia, be realistic. You have no degree, no career, no support system. You'll be scraping by for the rest of your life." Susan just cried, asking what they would tell people at the country club. I figured it out, but not in the way they had hoped. I didn't go back to law school. Instead, I started working, first as a paralegal, then as a consultant for a small government contractor. The work was intense, the hours were brutal, but I was the invisible architect of every deal I touched. By the time Chloe was 3, I had been recruited by a defense firm to manage classified projects. By 5, I was running their entire strategy division. My family had no idea, still doing that little assistant thing Gary would ask at the rare dinners I attended. "I'd just nod something like that." Susan would sigh and tell me it wasn't too late to make something of myself. Tiffany would smile sympathetically and offer me her hand-me-down designer bags for interviews. I never corrected them. What was the point? They had decided who I was the day I chose my daughter over their approval. They thought I was barely scraping by in a tiny apartment. They didn't know about the 4-bedroom house in the best school district or the $500,000 already sitting in Chloe's college fund. I drove a modest sedan to family events because my actual car, a Tesla, I kept in a Separate garage would raise questions I wasn't ready to answer. I had built a life that was a balance sheet of pure success, but to them I was still the spare daughter. My work had caught the attention of the highest offices in the state 2 years ago. I had successfully navigated a legal nightmare involving international contracts and federal compliance. I had saved the government $2 billion and prevented a scandal that would have ended several careers. The project was so classified that the people I worked with didn't even know my real name, but Governor Marcus Sterling knew. He had called me personally. Evelyn, you have one of the sharpest minds I have ever encountered. If you ever need anything, you call me directly. 6 months ago he had offered me a position
as deputy legal counsel for his administration. I said no, I preferred working behind the scenes, and I had Chloe to think about. He respected that, but the offer remained open. Parents have to look out for each other, he told me. Now, as I watched Chloe play, I realized my silence had been a luxury. My family had overdraft for years. They thought my compassion was a weakness, a resource they could exploit while keeping me at arm's length. They were about to find out that my silence wasn't a sign of failure. It was a strategic choice, and that choice was about to change the night of the party. The day of the party arrived like a clinical operation. I didn't go to a mall. I called a private stylist who brought a selection of floor-length gowns to my home. I chose a black silk piece that was architectural in its simplicitino sequins, no lace, just pure expensive authority. I paired it with a single diamond pendant and styled my hair into soft controlled waves. When I looked in the mirror, I didn't see the disappointing daughter. I saw a woman who moved markets. Tiffany messaged me that afternoon. It was a photo of her in a $20,000 designer gown, her hair teased into a frantic cloud of perfection. Thinking of you, sis. She wrote, stay cozy in your sweats tonight. Don't worry, I'll tell everyone you were too busy with work to make it. It's for the best. You wouldn't want to be the only one there without a label. I didn't reply. I just checked the time. 6:45 p.m. I drove to the Grand Crystal Ballroom in my Tesla. The silence of the electric motor matched the quietness of my mind. As I pulled up to the valet, the staff moved with practiced urgency. They didn't see a single mother. They saw a VIP. I met Marcus and his wife Caroline in the lobby. Evelyn, you look spectacular, Caroline said, hugging me. Lily has been talking about seeing Chloe all day. The governor is ready, Marcus added, his eyes sharp and professional. Shall we make an entrance? We walked toward the main ballroom through the glass doors of the private annex. I could see my family's party. They had a long table set for 25 people. Gary was at the head, looking flushed and proud in his tuxedo. Susan was fluttering around. Tiffany's boyfriend Preston, who looked bored out of his mind. We didn't head for the annex. We headed for table 1, the circular booth right in the center of the main floor, positioned so that anyone walking to the private rooms had to pass directly by us. It was the table reserved for the most powerful people in the building. As we sat down, I saw Tiffany out of the corner of my eye. She was standing by the bar in the annex, holding a cocktail. She looked over, her expression shifting from confusion to recognition to absolute shock. She nudged Susan, who turned and nearly dropped her glass. They didn't understand. They couldn't. In their world, I was a spare part. But as the governor of the state pulled out my chair and sat down to discuss the future of the region's defense infrastructure, the power dynamic in that room shifted so violently I could almost hear glass shattering. This was the feminist empowerment arc they never saw coming. I wasn't just at the party, I was the reason the party mattered. Evelyn, Marcus said, leaning in. Before we eat, I want to review the compliance notes on the Sterling contractor signature. Is the only thing holding that $1 billion deal together. I smiled, a thin, sharp line. Of course, Marcus. Let's get to work. The entrance at 7:25 p.m. The main doors to the ballroom creaked open. Gary led the way, looking every bit the proud patriarch in his tailored tuxedo. Susan followed closely behind, her eyes darting around the room, making sure everyone saw her. Then came Tiffany, draped in her red silk, clinging to Preston like he was a winning lottery ticket. They were followed by 20 other guests, extended family, business associates, and people Gary wanted to impress. To reach their private annex, they had to walk a gauntlet. They had to walk directly past table 1. I saw the exact moment Gary realized I was there. He stopped dead in his tracks 3 feet from our booth. His face went through a rapid-fire sequence of emotions: confusion first, then disbelief, then something that looked like fear. He had no idea that the party he was hosting, the guests he was trying to impress, the very room he had rented, none of it mattered compared to the woman sitting at table 1, his daughter, the spare part, the one who had just called in every favor, every contract, every late night of invisible work, and turned his Celebration into her coronation. Gary opened his mouth. Nothing came out. I smiled, raised my glass of water ever so slightly, and turned back to the governor. Now Marcus, about that compliance clause on page 47 behind me. I heard Susan whisper, "Is that Evelyn?" And then softer, terrified. "Who is that sitting next to her?" I picked up the phone. I didn't open the messages. I didn't listen to the voicemail. I opened the group chat titled Hayes Family and stared at the last message sent 3 days ago. A photo Tiffany had posted of her and Preston toasting at a vineyard with a caption, "Some of us actually show up for Dad." I had read it and said nothing, like I had said nothing 100 times before, but silence, I had finally learned, was not the same as forgiveness. Silence was just deferred action, and tonight the deferment period had ended. I typed 3 words into the group chat. "Check your email." Then I powered down the phone, placed it face down on the coffee table, and listened to the real silence, the kind that comes not from absence, but from completion. Chloe's soft breathing drifted down the hallway. Somewhere outside, an owl called once, and then stopped. The moonlight shifted across the hardwood floor like a slow, satisfied exhale. The aftermath. The next morning arrived. Without an alarm, I woke to Chloe jumping on my bed, her purple crayon still clutched in her fist. "Mommy, can we go back to the fountain today?" Lily said, "There are goldfish." "Maybe next weekend," I said, pulling her into a hug. Her hair smelled like strawberry shampoo and childhood. "Today, we're having pancakes with sprinkles." With all the sprinkles, we ate breakfast on the back porch, overlooking the garden. I had planted myself hydrangeas, lavender, and a small vegetable patch that Chloe insisted on watering every evening. The house was quiet in the way that only a home built entirely on your own terms can be. Quiet, no judgment, no performances, just the sound of a 5-year-old explaining why purple is objectively the best color. My phone stayed dark until noon. When I finally turned it back on, the notification screen was a war zone. 17 missed calls from Gary, 23 text messages from Susan, a voicemail from Tiffany so long that the transcription service had given up after 3 minutes, and 1 message from an unknown number that read, "This is Preston Whitfield, 3. My father would very much like to schedule a lunch with you. No pressure. Entirely off the record. Please let me know your availability." I deleted it without responding. Some invitations weren't worth opening. The reckoning. 3 days later, I drove to my parent house for the first time in 18 months. Not because they asked, though they had asked repeatedly, desperately, but because I had one final piece of business to settle. The house looked smaller than I remembered, or maybe I had just stopped shrinking myself to fit inside it. Susan opened the door before I could knock. Her eyes were red, her hair unwashed, her usual armor of pearls and perfection nowhere to be seen. "Evelyn," she breathed, reaching for me. I stepped back. "I'm not here for a hug, Mom. I'm here to collect the rest of my things from the attic and to tell you something face to face." Gary was waiting in the living room. He looked 10 years older than he had at the birthday party. His shoulders slumped, his tuxedo replaced by a wrinkled sweater, his eyes fixed on a stack of papers on the coffee table. The suspension notice, the audit referral, the beginning of the end of everything he had built on a foundation of borrowed pride and forged signatures. "You're really going through with this," he said. "It wasn't a question. The compliance review is out of my hands." I said, "The documents were submitted. The state auditor's office has opened a formal investigation. I didn't cause this, Gary. You did the moment you signed my name to that inheritance withdrawal. You chose this outcome. I just stopped covering for you." Susan made a sound like a wounded animal. "But we're family. Family protects each other. Family doesn't forge each other's signatures." I said quietly. "Family doesn't uninvite a daughter from her father's birthday because she might embarrass them in front of billionaires. Family doesn't spend 7 years telling a woman she's a failure while she's quietly saving the state from financial ruin." I paused, letting the weight of each word settle. "You didn't want a daughter, you wanted a scapegoat." And then, done playing that role, I walked to the attic, collected the few things that mattered: a photo of my grandmother, a box of Chloe's baby clothes, a faded copy of a children's book my late aunt used to read to me, and carried them to my Tesla. Without looking back, Gary called after me from the doorway, "Evelyn, please." I stopped, turned, met his eyes one last time. "I forgave you a long time ago," I said, "but forgiveness doesn't mean I have to keep letting you hurt me. Goodbye, Dad." The new beginning. 6 months later, the governor announced his new deputy legal counsel for strategic initiatives. The press release featured a photo of me shaking Marcus Sterling's hand in the Capitol Rotunda. Chloe sat on my hip in the photo, waving at the camera, her purple crayon tucked behind her ear. My mother sent me a letter last week. It was handwritten on her monogrammed stationery, the same stationery she had used for the note that started everything. But This time the words were different. Evelyn, I was wrong. I have been wrong for 7 years. I don't expect you to forgive me, but I would like to meet my granddaughter, not at a party, not for an audience. Just the three of us. If you'll let me, I haven't responded. Yet I'm not sure. I will. What I am sure of is this. The woman I am now doesn't need their approval. She doesn't need their invitations or their pity or their performative love. She has a daughter who thinks she hung the moon. She has a career that changes the trajectory of states. She has a garden full of hydrangeas and a kitchen full of pancakes with sprinkles, and she has something her parents never taught her. The quiet, unshakable knowledge that she belongs exactly where she is. The view from here, as I said that night, is exactly what I needed. I stared at the group chat icon, a photo from 5 years ago where I had been cropped out of the edge. I tapped settings, hit delete and exit, and watched the thread vanish into the digital void. This was the final twist Gary never saw coming. He thought my success was a weapon I would use to force my way back into his heart. He thought I wanted his apology, but the truth was much simpler. I didn't need him to see me. I just needed him to stop being in my way. The new chapter. A few months later, I officially accepted the appointment as Deputy Legal Counsel to the Governor. The announcement made the front page of the State Business Journal. My name was no longer a secret. I was no longer the invisible architect. I was the face of the administration's legal strategy. The press conference was held in the same ballroom where my family's empire had crumbled. I wore the same black silk gown, not out of spite, but because it fit, because I had earned it, because the woman who wore it now smiled easily at the cameras, lifted Chloe onto the podium beside her, and answered every question with the calm precision of someone who had nothing left to prove. A reporter asked if I had any comment on my father's legal troubles. I paused for exactly 1 beat. I have no comment on matters that are not before my office, I said, but I will say this. Every door that closed on me as a young mother only made me build my own, and those doors don't come with keys. For people who left me outside, the room went quiet. Then the applause started. The fallout. Gary's firm didn't survive the audit. Without the sterling contract, the debt he had been hiding for years came crashing down. He didn't go to prison. I had insured the investigation. Stayed civil rather than criminal, a final act of mercy that cost me nothing and gave him everything he deserved. To live with what he had done, not behind bars, but in the glaring light of ordinary life. He lost the house, the prestige, the image he had spent 60 years building. Last I heard, they were living in a modest 2-bedroom condo on the edge of town. Susan was complaining to anyone who would listen that Evelyn just became too busy for us. And in a way, she was right. I was busy. Raising a confident, brilliant daughter who had never once been told she was a disappointment. I was busy shaping the future of the state, negotiating contracts that created thousands of jobs, advising the governor on legal strategy, sitting in rooms where the air smelled not of old money, but of new possibilities. I was busy being exactly who I had always meant to be, the quiet victory. Sometimes people need to see you at your absolute best to realize they've been seeing you wrong all along, but by the time they realize it, you've already moved on. You've built a life that doesn't have a chair for them at the table, not because you're cruel, but because you finally understand that some tables are meant to be small. The best revenge isn't a loud confrontation or a public takedown. It isn't tears or shouting or proving someone wrong in front of an audience. The best revenge is much simpler than that. It is living well on your own terms in your own way, and finally letting the silence do the talking. 1 year later, I sat on my back porch on a Sunday morning, coffee in hand, watching Chloe chase fireflies across the grass. She was 6 now, reading chapter books, arguing about bedtimes, and still convinced that purple was the superior color. The garden had grown wild and beautiful around us, lavender brushing against hydrangeas, tomatoes ripening on the vine. My phone buzzed, a text from an unknown number. Evelyn, it's Susan. Your father has been diagnosed with early stage emphysema. He won't say it, but he wants to see you just once, please. I read the message twice, then I put the phone down, picked up my coffee, and watched my daughter catch a firefly in her cupped hand. She ran toward me, laughing, her face glowing with a tiny light trapped between her palms. Look, Mommy, I caught a star. I smiled. Yes, you did, baby. Yes, you did. I never replied to Susan's message, not because I was angry. The anger had burned out years ago, replaced by something quieter and more permanent. I didn't reply because I had finally learned that not every invitation deserves an answer. Not every door needs to be opened, and sometimes the most powerful word in the English language is not yes or no. Is simply silence. Epilogue. Do I agree with Evelyn's approach? Yes, not because it was vengeful, but because it was honest. She didn't destroy her family, they destroyed themselves. She simply stopped holding up the walls they had built on her back. She stopped pretending that cruelty was love, that exclusion was protection, that silence was submission. She chose her daughter. She chose her work. She chose herself. And in doing so, she taught everyone, watching including, Medhat, you don't need to be seen by the people who refuse to look. You just need to step into the light and let them realize too late that they were standing in the dark all along.